Welcome to the week ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Friday, we explore stories that are shaping our continent. Nigeria's custom revenue rose by 28.85%, while the NNPC's revenue fell by 13%. What does this contrasting performance mean for Nigeria's economy? Meanwhile, Nigeria has opened a new lithium processing plant to add value to its mineral resources and support industrialization. How can Nigeria maximize the benefits of its critical minerals? Is there a geopolitical angle to this? Finally, Moroccan authorities said they disrupted a suspected Islamic State-linked terrorist plot, highlighting ongoing security threats in the Sahel. What more should African countries do to tackle terrorism across the region? Joining us today for further insights is Samuel Article. Welcome, Samuel, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on the podcast.
It's always a pleasure having you.
Yeah.
Today, let's start with our first story where we're looking at the revenue from both customs and the NNPC. I mean, the NNPC recently went through the process of being a company, but still having some ownership by the government. So the government is running it as a company to be able to raise money, additional revenue for the country. But now we're seeing customs, the revenue of customs is rising and it rose by 28.85%. But on the other hand, we're seeing NNPC revenue fall by 30%. Why are we seeing this? Why do you think that we're seeing this contrasting performance from both these entities? And what do you think is their effect on the Nigerian economy?
Yeah, thanks a million for the question. I think it's clear that Nigeria is collecting more from trade, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the economy is anything healthier. You can't attribute that to being healthier. If you look closely at the custom figure, I think it points strongly to the fact that the Lagos Free Trade Zone Command, I think they generated about 408 billion, right, between January and June, and that was up from almost 317 last year, the same period last year. I think the key nuance insight that we could hold on here is very straightforward. If you try to interrogate the numbers, yeah, I think that's where the nuances is. Um, so the key thing to think about is this a fiscal gain? And that those are questions that we need to answer. Is it reflecting the fact that we are importing higher import? I mean, we're importing more things, meaning that we are importing high value things, right? That's something to ask about. Is the effect of the exchange rate? That's also things to think about. Or is it that we are now beginning to see better operationality? I mean, we've seen better compliance at the port. Those are core questions we need to think about. I think the insight here is very clear. Um, First, custom figure shows that things are moving in the right direction in terms of the overall picture of our national trade performance. But we should be very careful not to assume that because the Nigerian custom revenue had risen by 2.85%, it means it's rural. Oh, things are bubbling. It doesn't mean that. People could just be filling up their inventories. The way businesses work is that when you import goods into the country and you're paying government, ideally, maybe you're just stocking up your inventory, which could be that investors themselves, that means when I mean investors, I mean people that are managing some of those warehouses are this, they're beginning to believe more that the economy is about to pick up. And that suggests why they are building up their inventory. That could be one reason. The second reason to think about is this 2.85% that you talk about, I think it's connected to the Lagos Free Trade Zone Command. Again, one key thing to think about here in terms of the nuance insight is that higher custom revenue could suggest that we're having efficiency, right? In those places. Efficiency comes back in terms of how fast we are processing cargoes, how fast we are processing things through those port system, rather than keep them on the highway waiting, I mean, queuing and then waiting like perpetually. But also, it also suggests that yes, our if our import is growing, it means that all the old noise around what we are doing, it suggests that we are not there what we want to do. Because I mean, if activities at the port is increasing, government revenue is increasing at the port, it's good, but it also suggests that people prefer, right? People because the economy is not growing fast enough. If you look at it across the sector, so people still prefer to import goods into the country, and of course that means essentially that we are not creating the jobs we should be creating. So overall, in terms of the custom revenue, I mean, I know I spent a lot of time there. When activity kick off, it suggests that yes, businesses are bringing in goods and then they are piling up inventory, which is positive for the economy, meaning that the direction of travel suggests that people believe the economy will grow. Now, for oil, NNPC, I think you you mentioned that the oil revenue of Nigeria actually came down from 4.97, right, to in April. I mean, sorry, it fell from 4.97 in April to 4.3 trillion in May. Um, the truth is this, if you look closely at the output, I think the output increased. If NNPC report is anything to go by, I think we grew the total number of crude oil that we are producing in Nigeria. So in terms of, real time, the oil sector is growing. It's just that they are having challenges with prices. And we know pricing of crude oil have nothing to do, well, it could have something to do with Nigeria, but as at this time, it has nothing to do with Nigeria, to be candid. It's an international, it's caused by a lot of factors. One of it is the war in Iran. The US war in Iran could have created some of those chaos. And then you have this volatility in oil price. That's been the case. So we can't take it. We can't look at month on month figure and quickly draw insight and say this is the direction. It just again reinforces the fact that oil price is extremely volatile. But if you take it together, if you take everything together, I think what is clear now is that our revenue diversification drive is something we must take serious. As a government, as a people, we need to pay more emphasis on our people. That's the people of Nigeria. That's the working poor, the have-not, the rich. That should be the focal point of policy decisions in Nigeria. So I always make this analogy, and it sounds so weird that if you have 1 million Nigerians that pay 1 million naira in tax every year, you essentially have 1 million, 1 million, right? If you put that in context, we are talking about 100. We are talking about if you multiply 1 million by 1 million, what does it give you? It gives you, how will I call it? I mean, it gives you 12 zeros. And you know what that means in terms of your revenue cost. So that should have been the focus of government. How do we get the 40 million people in Nigeria that are working, how do we increase their income so that they begin to contribute more into the government coffers? That should be the first thing, the priority. The second thing also to remember is that businesses, when they make profit, they pay tax to the state. So the second question now we need to think about is how do we increase how do we make our environment robust enough such that businesses will continue to make profit, and with that, the government revenue pushes up? That's the second thing to think about. So overall, I will say there is it's a danger. I mean, we can't draw insight from this, but yeah, in terms of the fiscal direction, I think on the non-oil sector, it's positive. On the oil sector, there are still risks, but again, it's too early to say anything concrete.
Where Nigeria has opened a new lithium processing plant. This is kind of to add value to our natural resources, kind of supporting industrialization. How do you think Nigeria can benefit from these critical minerals? And is there a geopolitical angle to this? Because when we have foreign investment, foreign investments coming to the country, how can we ensure we also protect Nigerians from this investment? How do we ensure that things like technology transfer, skills development, creating jobs for Nigerians as well, rather than just exporting processed minerals from our country? Um, how can Nigerians also leverage on lithium resources to strengthen our economic and geopolitical position? I know it's a mouthful. That was a mouthful.
Yeah, I mean, to be sincere, I think it's a positive one. I always like to see industries in Nigeria. I always tell people that if we could get um, a Dangote cement factory, if we could get, let's say, 10,000 all over the country, I think in terms of our industrial base, we become industrialized. That's what it means. So for every factory, every processing plant capacity that we add into the mix, we are actually getting there. Because if you have 10,000 factories in the country, and they're directly responsible, even if they are employing on average, they're employing on average, let's say 2,000 workers. You could do the math, that's 20 million manufacturing jobs. And we all know, and the economics have demonstrated repeatedly, that for every one manufacturing jobs you have in an economy, it has a way of actually creating seven additional jobs in downstream sectors, maybe in the upstream or in the downstream. And so that should be the anchor point of Nigeria's industrial story. How do we have 1,000? I think we're getting there. We are not close to 1,000. We need 1,000, then we need to aim towards 10,000, and then we become an industrialized country. That's where we should be. So one of the investment that come through now is this Diamond New Energy Plant, right, that you have in Nasarawa,
Yeah.
um, which was commissioned, I think, in this month. It was commissioned in this month. If you look at the investment, I think you're looking at almost 6,000 tons per day, right? That's massive, right? Of course, again, I will always say it. There's always the Chinese connection. And then for the first time, typically, we're looking closely at the lithium market as it were. We are not going there to sell them, or we are selling them process at least to a particular degree. Even if we are not the goal is actually to get to a point whereby Nigerians themselves can set up a factory that produces battery that can rival the BYDs of this world, the Teslas of this world. But we're not there yet. The truth is that we have capacity to do that. All we need to do is, if we have been investing, let's say the government commit ₦1 trillion into R&D within the next 5 years, and bring young people into labs to begin to experiment with different types of these things. We will come up with some of those things. And of course, it doesn't take time to create motors, and then you begin to create electric cars in the country. We have craftsmen in Nigeria that already can build and mold cars that can compete with any cars in the world. Of course, there are safety features that we still need to learn. So the direction of travel in in that pathway is there. Also, we need to remember also as a country, we have an electricity problem. And it's not that we have electricity problem per se, but more like we have an electricity problem. Yeah, where electricity is not being delivered into people's house, but we have the capacity to become leading in terms of, especially when you look at a plug-in solar system. But the problem we have is that even if Nigeria government actually drop all the unusual and unnecessary regulation around plugging solar, meaning that you put solar over your roof, you don't have to think too much about putting batteries in there. During the day when the sun shines, you generate electricity, you put it into the grid system, your meter reads backward, and in the night, when the light and the sun goes, then you draw back what you have produced and then you move on. We could do that. We just need a framework for doing that, and we need a smart grid system to be able to do that. Unfortunately, plans to do that maybe about 10 years ago have been jettisoned. So why did I go here? I think again it reinforced the fact that this lithium element itself could propel us into becoming one of the, and to be candid, if we look historically at Nigeria, we've done well in terms of battery technology. I mean, if people don't know about that, yes. If you look at Nigeria very well, we've done a lot of research on battery technologies. It's just that we've not been able to take some of those research to market, and we need to find a way of creating it. That's why we need to begin to think of things like a knowledge transfer partnership where industries and companies, schools and research institutes begin to work hand in hand. Anyway, putting it all together, I will say that yes, if you look at capacity of Nigeria, we are looking at almost 23 mineral deposit right in commercial quantity across the country. Presently, we are doing less than 1% of our GDP from mining. Of course, there are issues around that we need to address, from mapping to reserve certificate to transparency around, I mean, around the licenses to security. If you look closely at the public cadastral matter, you look at investment in bankable data. So there are problems. I know there are massive problems, but there are opportunities for us to turn the clock. My take here, I think the key lessons we should take from this is this. We've seen investment begin to come into the solid mineral sector. We need to learn from that. How did it happen? How did we approach it? More importantly, how do we reinforce it? We've seen it happen with cement. We are now seeing it happening with lithium. And we still have about 23 more to go. So, who is driving it? What are lessons are we picking from this? And how do we transform it? That is the core thing for us to think about. I will say the direction of travel is positive, especially around lithium. We saw massive growth in iron ore. I say in iron ore, I mean in what do you call it? What am I calling it now? Cement, right? In cement, we thought that with cement growing aggressively, we will see a rapid expansion of gypsum, but unfortunately, that's not happened. But we are seeing things happen in the lithium ore sector, which is positive. How do we accelerate across board? I think that should be the key thing. I will end by saying Nigerian government need to invest massively in infrastructure, whether it's electricity, whether it's road, whether it's water, whether it's rail, whether it's security, whether it's the port, we need to invest. It suggests here we are, if you look closely at things, I mean, on paper, it seems we are saying all the right things. But what are we doing in terms of action? I think that's the core thing we need to take into cognizance as we begin to power along. So I would say it's a positive one. I'll take it from there. It's positive. Let's see how it turns out. I hope Nigeria benefit from it. I think that's the core thing for me.
I mean, I agree with you. We need more industrialization. Nigerian government needs to take more action, infrastructure as well, and research and development. I mean, you pointed out supporting young people to, kind of conduct research already, do the testing, because that will help the growth of that industry as well. Let's move to our final story, third and final story, where we're seeing the Moroccan authorities have said that they have disrupted a suspected Islamic State-linked terrorist plot. I mean, this just highlights that there is really an ongoing threat, not only in the West Africa, but also you're seeing it in the Sahel. You're seeing it moving around, even going to North Africa. Um, what more can African countries do to be able to tackle terrorism across the region, across the continent? Because we can't keep having, these silos of terrorism attacks, and then most times we say, "Oh, it's in West Africa, it doesn't concern us," and then it's in North Africa, it doesn't concern us, but it does concern the whole continent. So, what efforts do you think the continent as a whole can do to ensure that we tackle terrorism head on?
I think it's better to lay the context here, right? If you look at the Morocco case now, what it shows clearly that the Sahel insecurity is no longer confined to the Sahel. It's no longer a Sahel insecurity. It's gone
Yeah.
beyond that. That's what it demonstrates to us. If you look at the report you're talking, that's the Reuters report. It says that they arrested about 10 suspects across 7 cities. That's massive, right? It's not that they're just moving. That means they spread. They are looking closely at 10, I mean, 7 cities. And that's just the preliminary investigation. And if you look at what it's saying it's linking them to the Islamic State Sahel branch. Now, this group technically are territorially based in Mali, in Burkina Faso, or in Niger. Why, of course, it's propaganda. If you look at its propaganda, financing, attack plan, is now extending to North Africa and going beyond. That means we are having a serious problem at hand. Now, African states, I think you have a question about what the African states should do. I think the first thing is they need to track networks, not only armed fighters. Now, we've gone beyond armed fighters. I mean, I know people look at Nigeria, you say, oh, people moving with arms on bikes are moving around. Now we're getting to a point where they are building network. Just imagine in Morocco, we are talking about 7 cities. Now you can imagine how embedded this demonic organization is across Africa. So we need to move to begin to track the network, not just armed fighters. I think that's the first thing. If you look what the Morocco authority reported, they said they reported that they seized weapons, right? They seized bomb-making materials, chemicals, the digital materials, modified vehicles. And that suggests that the operational chain involving recruitment, whether it's instruction, whether it's procurement, whether it's transportation, whether it's target selection, is now decentralized. That's dangerous again. Mean that each of those cells can independently procure their weapons, plan, transport it, pick up a target, and then execute their terrorist and then nefarious activity. That tells us another story. So the narrative should be that counterterrorism or anti-terrorism that we call it, or the Americans we call it, is not effect can never be effective before the attack stage. We need to look at financial intelligence. We need to look at cyber monitoring. We need to look at border alert. We need to look at local informant system. So we need to expand the African, and we need to begin to share information more as Africans. That's where we are. I think there's also something to mention here. If you look at the Sahel itself, the Sahel is now a regional security system, whether we like it. I know, yeah, if you look at the Council of Foreign Relations, they noted that I think about 51% of the global terrorism death occur in the Sahel in 2024. Shows clearly that this is becoming the art of terrorism. If 51, almost half of terrorism attack in the world, sorry, is happening in the Sahel, you know what that means. And you have groups, the JNIM, the ISGS, you have the ISWAP of this world, they are all concentrated in this region. And of course, it's scary when you look at it and you try to rationalize this. Of course, the insight is simple, right? North Africa, coastal West Africa, we cannot treat the Sahel as a distance border problem. We need to come together and we need to begin to purge this scourge, as they will call it. Second, I think which is paramount, is the civilian protection. We need to protect our civilian. We need to protect the vulnerable, the mothers, the children, to begin to protect them. They should be at the heart of our policy security design. How do we, if you look at the game, go back to the Reuters report. I think it's saying that government and allied forces in Burkina Faso and in Mali, they killed more civilians than even jihadist groups. That tells us a lot about what this report is saying. So rather than government itself killing the jihadist groups, the people at the receiving end of government's response are always been the civilian. That's telling, right? They are not at the heart of decision making. Vulnerable people at the crossroad, and then they are dying aimlessly. I mean, if you look at the HRA and the AC lead data, that's what it's saying. I think the matter before abusive operation can create grievance, legitimate. Whether we like it or not, if you're following this pattern, just to put it in context, you're only creating and you are legitimizing insurgency. And that again is a big problem. I mean, we've seen how it has happened in Nigeria, where government killing insurgents. I don't know how I'm using the word government because they say it's the police, it's the army, we don't know. That cascade into Boko Haram and it's still with us down 20 years down the line. I would say finally that the response that we get must include both governance and the political economy. Armed group will survive through informal taxation, smuggling, illicit mining, cattle rousting, ransom on kidnappers, and their protection racket. That's how they survive. And we've seen that happen in Nigeria. We see that happen in Mali. We've seen that across the board. We need to cut that off. You need to cut their supply off. How do you cut their supply off? Of course, we need to begin to take things like kidnapping serious. Anytime you see somebody being kidnapped, somebody pay ransom, what you are doing is like you are funding the next operation. People should always remember that. And so the African state needs an intelligence cooperation. They need justice for people. They need to make sure people are at the heart of their decision making around security. I think if we can do that, I think we begin to purge those trudge. Now, I will end by saying this. If you look closely at the Nigerian states, the minimum wage at best, if you get it, is how much? The minimum wage in Nigeria is ridiculously very low if you look at it in dollar terms. It doesn't cost a you don't need so much money, given the how poverty have ravaged our community, to actually recruit millions of people into this. And all you need is just a small group of people, kidnap people, get the money, use that money to recruit more, and then the base begin to expand rapidly. And that's what we've seen in Nigeria. Within a space of 5 years, the kidnapping activity that begin to happen in very posh places expand rapidly, that it has finally touched the coast. That is touched Lagos, it's touched Enugu, it's touched all our coastal states. It has come in from the north, and then it has encroached into the west, and then it's touching Lagos State. That is why we need to be serious as governments. No window dressing, no, I like you, I don't like you. We need to take our security of life. We need to take our the secure. I keep using the word security, is completely different from defense. We need to ensure that our civilians are protected. It's not about the reactive nature. It's about preventing things. I mean, a little bit of experience. I was in Jos at some point in time when criminals actually did attack. They attacked left, right? The left, oh, we protect, we protect. It doesn't stop. A few months after, they still attack. So we definitely do not learn from experience, and that is why we have found ourselves here. Mali found itself where it is. Burkina Faso has found itself where it is. We see Libya. We see crisis across the Sahel. We need to come together as Africa. We need to be secure. We need to be serious about our security systems, and we need to begin to remove and purge. Purge the scourge that is actually holding us down.
I do agree with you that we need to, be more serious with security, stop financing them as well. And the government needs to address issues like strongly kidnapping as well. This brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you very much, Samuel, for joining us on the podcast today and for sharing your lovely insights.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Always a pleasure. To all our listeners, this podcast is by SBM Intelligence. You can access our podcast by searching for SBM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, like, share, and let us know your thoughts on the 3 stories we had today. For deeper insights into our work, you can visit our website at sbmintel.com. Remember to connect with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. Thank you for tuning into the week ahead. Join us next Friday for more updates that are shaping the African continent.